Welcome everyone to our second annual Environment and Natural Resources SIG. We are really glad that you've joined us today, and we're really excited for this event. And honestly, doing it in this virtual format is pretty exciting too. And I think we've got a really great program for you today. So I'm Mike Bialish, and with me is Sunny Fleming, and we are the Esri Environment and Natural Resources team for state and local government. And in our roles, we get to work all across the country, helping to address challenges faced by environmental and natural resources agencies, which honestly it's a pretty sweet gig. We'll be facilitating the session today, and with us is also Megan Martinez, who is in our industry marketing group. She's also focused in this space with us as well, and she will be moderating, especially as questions and comments come in. Okay, as far as the agenda today, we'll start out with some quick context on the purpose of the SIG, and then we'll have some really excellent presentations that we're really excited about from key users across the country that we think you'll find not only inspirational, but also show how GIS technology is really making a difference in addressing critical challenges, particularly in Missouri, South Dakota, and South Carolina. This lineup also includes Missouri State Parks, who is the Environment and Natural Resources SAG Award winner this year, so props to them for sure. And they really have an awesome story to tell you, and I'm certainly not going to steal any of their thunder right now. We'll then have some time for questions related to these presentations, and I'll mention now to please, enter those questions as we're going along, and we'll get to as many as we can. Enter those in the Q&A section of the site. Then Sunny and I have some polls that set up to gather some feedback, which certainly helps us and our focuses with our efforts, but also for all of us to see where we all are as a community related to GIS implementation and particular focuses. All right, so getting right into it, and speaking of the environment and natural resources community, the real purpose of having this SIG and doing events like this is to really come together and connect and collaborate towards many of the common goals that we all have. This slide is actually one that Jack showed on Monday, and it's the vision, of course, around the user conference and geography and GIS in general. And I really feel like it applies to our community and the spirit of this event as well. Just as a quick example of this, Sunny and I are often, and when I say often, it's almost daily, asked to talk about trends and what we're seeing across the country, because there's really this clamoring to see how others are addressing and solving critical challenges and what can be learned from that. But another aspect of this, though, is that environment and natural resource issues, are often very cross-cutting by nature, involving many different stakeholders, many disciplines, and therefore many different agency types at all levels, as well as the public in general. So how we, come together as a community around these issues, is extremely critical to success, and honestly is a requirement of the work that you all do. And, really helps to inspire and learn from each other, share experiences, and collaborate towards common goals. And frankly, having fun by working together towards this. And I think we have a bit of fun in store for you today. There's also just tremendous innovation and success being achieved in our space. And you have to really look no further than the wide variety of natural resources-oriented SAG Award winners this year. I want to take this time to not only acknowledge these organizations and their awesome achievements, but also to note the wide variety of winners, who are doing extremely innovative work at all levels of government and on, critical issues that matter, to the health and sustainability of our critical natural resources at all scales. It's just amazing. And I really just think that this, it really illustrates the great work that's happening in this space, and something that we can frankly all take advantage of by coming together like this. Speaking of coming together, one of the new resources we've set up this year is an environment and natural resources community story map. If you've talked to Sunny or I over the past week, we've definitely mentioned this to you. We just can't help ourselves, but really this is indicative of the spirit of not only, this SIG, but also where we would love to take the community alongside and with you. The idea behind this is, to come together virtually and get to know each other, and truly connect and learn from each other and, about each other. Many of you have already joined this week, which is awesome. And we hope more of you will join following this event today. And, honestly, this is just that initial connection, right? And just the beginning. We see this as way beyond a once a year SIG at the UC type of thing. And you'll definitely hear more about that later today and beyond today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sunny now, who's going to lead us into the user presentations and really the overall trends in this space that are behind them. So Sunny, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Mike. So welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be giving this virtual special interest group meeting and being a part of this. Jack's theme this year, as Mike mentioned, is interconnectedness. And Mike and I have the great pleasure of working with all of you across the nation and support. And you all are some of our longest standing customers at Esri. And I think that's really important. I think this interconnectedness, it's certainly something that Mike and I see every day out of the work you all do, but I think our users really understand this, really well. They have a deeper understanding. Jack also says in his presentation that understanding precedes action. Mike and I really took that to heart with this, and this is the theme of our session today. So we've asked our presenters, who are your peers, to discuss their work around those 3 pillars. We think their work will resonate with the broader themes of our user community, the things that you all have to address every day. And I'm just hope you all are really inspired by what you see today and you're able to take this and internalize it with the work that you all do. So with that, we'll begin with Missouri and their efforts to understand.
All right, so let me get our screen shared here. So my name is John Haslag. I'm a GIS specialist with the Missouri Office of Geospatial Information. And I support Missouri State Parks. Also here with me is Debbie Bridewell. She's the GIS manager for MoDNR. Just for a little background, I began supporting Missouri State Parks right around 2.5 years ago. At that time, several programs within state parks were making use of GIS on some level. In fact, the department had GIS for around 20 years. However, most of the geospatial data at the time I came in was siloed. Now, whether this was between programs, between operating regions or sites, or even person to person in the same office, there was a lot of data, but not everybody could see what they needed, and nobody could see all of the division's geospatial data. This led to a lot of limited collaboration and a lot of duplication of efforts. While there were people in parks that saw this problem, there was no real plan for a unified GIS approach until we decided we needed a geospatial strategy. And the first step in developing that was a kickoff meeting with Esri, which Mike attended. And at that meeting, we had representatives of each parks program, and we identified goals, challenges, just different things that parks was facing that they thought GIS could be a solution to. From that meeting, a roadmap was created, and a big part of that was an asset inventory. And so 2 programs, planning and development and cultural resource management, both proposed creating a system to update the way assets were tracked in parks. One was focused specifically on historic assets and condition assessments of those assets. The other was more broadly focused on cataloging all of the assets within the park system. This was everything from structures down to manholes. They wanted to track everything. So both projects stressed a need for visualization of all of their data. They wanted simple field collection, and they wanted the ability to generate reports based on the data they'd collected. And at the time, both programs were tracking assets through a shared access database, but the data in that database was not really GIS ready. But it was our starting point. And as you can see there, just of the structures, about 70% were lacking any kind of geospatial information, and the rest was kind of shaky for different reasons. So each program agreed that structures would be a good starting point for the inventory. From the previous data, the structures were the things that were the most fleshed out. And both teams produced and proposed a schema based on how their data was already structured. So they were running queries out of Access, and those were basically the starting points for our schemas. But since planning and development was going to be cataloging all structural assets, while CRM, cultural resource management, was focused on historic assets, it was decided that we'd use P&D's schema as the base for the system. Along with the data that was already being tracked, both teams also proposed a set of new data that would be tracked for each asset and would be program specific. These came in the form of, for planning and development, major systems, and for cultural resource management, that historic condition assessment. These attributes were added to the base data as related tables that would be visible to anybody viewing the data, but would only have editing privileges given to the authorized program. This way, that data would no longer be siloed within the programs. So both teams started out wanting to use Collector. I mean, it's right there in the name. It is a field collector app. It was very intriguing to them. It was map-based, which they knew they wanted to visualize that data. But they quickly realized that the number of attributes they were collecting for each structure, which was over 100 at the time, could be daunting in the collector user interface. So I showed them the form-based nature of Survey 123. It's got grouping that is collapsible. We have conditional logic that can be applied to some of the data entry. Once they saw that, they quickly decided that they'd really like to have that in addition to Collector. And of course, both teams wanted a web-based editor for pre and post field work and generating reports. And they also wanted a fancy dashboard for progress tracking. So pretty much every app I showed them, they wanted it. They wanted all the apps, and we were happy to give it to them. And so while the apps were still in the development phase, both teams began taking them out for pilot runs to nearby state parks. This is really when we started to discover how users were going to actually be using the field apps. From their feedback and observations we made while going out and shadowing them in the field, we made numerous enhancements to the way the apps worked. We refined domains, we refined pick lists and input mask and everything else. And this was really the stage at which Survey 123 was realized to be the clear favorite by our field crews for data entry. At this point, also the collector arm of the project kind of became more of a park navigator and an information lookup. We were able to assign attachments to different features and things like that that would be useful for field crews, but the importance of collector more or less shrank at this time, and Survey 123 kind of took over as our preferred field app. And so with the users trending more towards Survey 123, we dedicated more time to that application, making use of various poll table functions and calculations to further automate the data entry and increase standardization of data whenever we could. And so another trend that began to arise during the pilot program was that both teams realized that they had asked for too much from the original data source. In the beginning of the process, there was a real push to adhere to the data as it had been recorded in that Access database and really to stick to that structure. But as the teams went out into the field and everyone involved with field collection came to the same conclusion, that they were tracking just too many attributes. And a lot of them had very little bearing on what they actually wanted to accomplish with the system. And it was just a matter that with the old system, they had always just tracked things because they were there. Somebody at some point had put them in there and everybody just kept going. But as everybody started to see how agile the system we were building with the Esri applications was, you know, if something didn't serve the purpose, they were more than happy to get rid of it or to consolidate it with other things that would make it make more sense. And this is something that carried over well beyond our pilot program into production, where the Centralized Asset Management Program, or CAMP as we call it now, it's continued to be a fully collaborative effort between GIS staff and state parks. It's ever evolving. And the Central Asset Management Program entered its production phase in about May of 2019. So we've been at it for a little over a year. And in that time, we've surveyed around 70% of the structures across Missouri's 91 state parks and state historic sites. Over 150 structures that were not tracked in the previous tracking system have been added. These were structures that had been built and just never added, and we found them and visualized them and everything else. And at present, 1,185 major systems and 156 historic conditions assessments have been recorded, and that's that program specific data. Going forward with the system, we are currently working on expansion to track things like campgrounds, roads, elements of utility networks such as water, sewer, and electric. And as we go, more programs are seeing the value of this unified approach. While they may not have a particular interest in structures, they do have an interest in unifying this GIS data so that everybody can see what's going on in these parks as far as planning and development goes. And beyond that, up-to-date data that we are collecting is already affecting budget allocations in park regions. They've already started taking this data and are using it to plan and prioritize repairs and replacements within the parks, which was really a main goal of P&D was this planning component. But I think South Dakota is going to talk a little bit more about that side of things. So that is who I'll pass it over to now. Thank you very much.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much. I think that really resonated with our community. No matter who you are, what kind of organization you are, you definitely have things you have to manage, understand on the ground, and see in that way. Next, we're going to go to South Dakota. They were really tackling an issue that we're seeing in the conservation community, not just in the US, but across the globe, and that's a decline in outdoor participation. So let's listen in and see how they tackled that and planned to address it.
Good morning. My name is Tanaya Bethke, and I'm with South Dakota Game, Fish and Parks. I'm our R3 coordinator, and I'm also the division staff specialist over our education programs. I've got two other colleagues on the call this morning. We have Ross Scott, who is our division staff specialist over GIS, and he's also our GIS coordinator, and Kyle Caskey, who is our GIS program specialist. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about how we've used Esri to really engage in the planning part of South Dakota Game, Fish and Parks for resource allocation and getting into our programming and outreach. So with this first slide, you can take a look at our data. This is ancient history data right here. This is the way that we used to try to figure out and dowse our way to conclusions about where we were losing hunters and anglers. That's my job as the R3 coordinator, is to figure out how we can recruit, retain, and reactivate hunters, anglers, and shooting sports enthusiasts. And the problem is that with a picture like this, how in the world can I figure out where I'm losing people at a more rapid rate perhaps than other areas, and by license type or gender or ethnic breakout? And so I really was struggling with how to direct our state's resources based on trends being pulled from access tables and Excel files, until one day Kyle Caskey walked into my office and blew my mind. So next slide, please, or next click. So Kyle had gone to an Esri conference and had done a little bit of playing in his free time, and just walked in and showed me this dashboard one day. And this is a graphic and spatial representation of all of that data that you saw in the previous table. And by license type, by gender, by date, by county, I can see in one image exactly where I am losing hunters and anglers, so that I can direct resource allocation from the state to focus on those hotspots. And I don't think Kyle understood exactly how this was going to transform the way that we do business, or how sexy I thought this dashboard was when he first walked into this office. I mean, this is an amazing dashboard. I was very excited about that. So with that, we're really working on the planning aspect of how to do intentional, effective, efficient resource placement to utilize our budget to the greatest ability and have the biggest return on investment for our public. So I'm going to transition over to Kyle, and he's going to dig into what this dashboard can really do for us.
And jump to the next slide there. So this, like I said, was how Tanaya put it. We're informing our outreach marketing policy with R3 efforts is the main focus of this dashboard. Just to jump back a little bit, previously I had worked with our licensing data to some extent on different projects, but not to the extent that other staff may have been looking at this data. However, I knew that there were challenges with that data, inconsistencies. Just basically the biggest problem was the size of that data as well. So started out with some initial input from our staff, seeing what they were actually looking for, then basically moved forward from there. So initially I did start out by just staring at that table of hundreds of thousands of records. So as most, GIS professionals, my initial input was to map that data. So, however, staring at hundreds of dots on a map isn't much better than, looking at hundreds of records of tabular data as well. So the next step there was to actually associate that data to better reveal a story with that map. So initially I started looking for that relationship that we could associate with those license holders. Concluded on this would be zip code in our county. This was where our actual license holders were residing themselves. So initially I came up with this map here, which is our initial density or choropleth map. This is basically the start of our future plans. This actually relayed some information of the story, but did not portray the whole thing of what we were trying to accomplish from this. So when we look at the specific map itself, it did reveal some information, highest concentrations of licenses purchases. However, for South Dakota specifically, this is some information we knew, as this basically told us areas with highest populations were buying more licenses. One thing we did not expect to receive from this was looking at our non-resident states as well. This actually revealed our no to low license purchases of areas, but even cooler was these areas of high concentrations of sales coming from areas across the states that we didn't even know we had. So you can go next slide. So by mapping this data, it did tell us a little bit more about our license holders, but like I said, it didn't tell us a whole lot more, just gave us a visual aspect of that tabular data. So to dig deeper into that data, first had to determine how we could do that. So one thought we had was coming across was a way to actually filter through that data and to have that ability to do that, hopefully this would reveal a different picture. So, in no better way to filter our data than to interact with that data is to use a operations dashboard. With this platform, we were able to actually create that interactive tool we were looking for. Here, this actually allowed us to filter our data, access those fields associated with that data, as well as create that method to answer questions we either were unable to answer before, questions that were time consuming to answer, or even questions we didn't even know we had. So here, with all that data, with the filtering capabilities, with the dashboard, we were actually able to compare do our yearly comparison of that license sales, actually showing us areas of potential growth. Yet we were even to look at a bigger picture of total sales across the whole United States, narrowing that down to a state level, as well as bringing the focus even down to the county level. Hit it one more time. So in addition to that, going down to the county level, we're actually able to observe overall trends of our data based upon the targeted year. This would include month of sale, our age distribution of those license holders, as well as even a gender breakdown. So this was very useful information to us. It allowed us to answer some of those questions that we didn't even know we had, as well as just giving that visual aspect to staff that may be unfamiliar with actually working with that data. But one of the most powerful things that we're able to achieve with this was actually, as our main concern these days, is looking at our R3 aspects, our retention, our reactivation, as well as our recruitment. So here we were able to incorporate a map which actually looked at a reactivation rate of those license holders. So that rate actually looks over the last 3 years of license holders, revealing areas where we're getting the highest repeat of sales, but in contrast, showing those areas where we're potentially losing those individuals. So to furthermore allow us to take this information and perform targeted outreach within those areas themselves. So with that, I'll pass it on to Ross.
Hey everybody, Ross Scott, South Dakota Game Fish and Parks GIS coordinator. Work with Tanaya and Kyle extensively on this project. My role is more of the administrative side of things. With this tool that Kyle created, we've kind of gone over, what the initial goals of the project were, but we have some new and unprecedented and unexpected use of this tool that I'm going to go over. Given these highly emotional and unprecedented times, we're kind of looking at a number of ways to use this tool as a look into the administrative world of license sales and revenue. Most recently, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've used this tool paired with a couple other resources that we have to address rumors regarding resident and non-resident travel into the state, and incorporated this tool into management recommendations at the high levels of our organization. So, for example, on the screen here is our non-resident annual and 3-day fishing license sales by week. You can see that this is our spring. Goes up and down based on the current pandemic that we're going through. However, paired with this tool, we can actually we can visually look and see where some of our highest concentrations of non-resident fishing license sales are coming from. So this spring, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and Wyoming seem to be some of the more densest license sales this spring. However, when you look at the resident information for our license sales, you can see that we did have a spike in resident fishing license sales compared to the average of 2017 through 2019. And again, paired with this tool, we can see where the highest density of these recreational licenses are coming from. This is really important because at all levels of our government, all across the country, people were faced with the question of restricting travel, closing hunt or fishing seasons, and this really was a tool for myself and other coordinators, other staff, other commissions to really utilize to take a look and see if we can justify or create recommendations for management decisions based on our COVID-19 response. And I'll send it back to Sanaya for this one.
So as Ross mentioned, we've had a couple of unforeseen potential ways to use these tools that have greatly expanded the way that we do business. So not only looking at regulations during COVID, but also now looking into the future of how we're planning for our state. So another one of our GIS program specialists came back from a conference and told me all about geo enrichment layers. These conferences are going to get us in trouble, Ross. I have to tell you that. So those geo enrichment layers, what we hope to do is to be able to lay over geo enrichment layers on top of those maps on our dashboard and take a look at customer trends to allow us to see where we can do very targeted outreach to members that may have specific marketing behaviors. So for example, let's say we've got a bunch of consumers who are purchasing a bunch of ammunition in a particular part of the state, but still have to drive 3 hours to get to the closest shooting range. Wouldn't that be a smart place to put a shooting range close to those folks? Or the same for an archery range, the same thing for outreach and education programs. If we have a high rate of lapsed anglers in a particular part of the state, that might be a really great place to target some of our efforts instead of just broadcasting education and outreach, which is not necessarily the most effective use of our resources. So that's one major impact that we're using to strategically plan where we're putting resources in our state. And what that also allows us to do is start looking at what kind of data we would like to collect on diverse populations to make sure that we as an agency are focusing on inclusion and focusing in on populations that may not have access to resources in the same way that other populations do in our state. So this tool, it's been big for us and transformative for how we are planning resource implementation. And with that, I believe we're going to hand it off to South Carolina to talk about how they've been acting based on their planning.
Thank you so much, Tanaya. That was awesome. South Dakota is doing really great work, and the solutions that they used are something that can be deployed out of the box. We have an awesome solutions team here at Esri, and these solutions, you can either find them by going to solutions.arcgis.com, or now we have a new application inside ArcGIS Online, just like Experience Builder, just like our story maps that you can click on, go in there and deploy these solutions, and it's a plug and play kind of deal. South Carolina used their GIS infrastructure to really address a workflow that every state has to conduct at some level. They had a diversity of stakeholders that they had to kind of speak to, and let's hear how they implemented a solution and took some action.
Thanks very much, Sunny. So yeah, as Sunny said, my name is Joe Lemeris. I am the GIS and data manager for the South Carolina Heritage Trust Program, which is under the state's Department of Natural Resources. And in addition to managing the state's natural and cultural heritage preserves, the program is responsible for our database for rare, threatened, and endangered species and natural communities. So I'm really excited to give an overview about the projects we've been working on over the past year or so to improve upon how we collect, manage, and distribute data to stakeholders by leveraging these various components of ArcGIS Enterprise through the assistance of the Enterprise Advantage program. And it really allowed us to act on this solution to a problematic workflow we were having historically. So for a brief bit of background, we're we did have some planning, of course, involved with this project, which revolved around a central workflow for the Natural Heritage Program, which is reviewing and commenting on development projects with respect to rare species found on site or nearby. Some of these are coming from environmental consulting firms, local governments, to understand impacts to species, and depending on the level of complexity, it could often take somewhere between 4 and 5 hours to respond to a single request. We responded to over 200 requests per year, with about a staff of 1 on average doing that work. So from a consultant's perspective, the only really available data pertaining to this heritage data set has been static county lists, as you see here. These lists have been cumbersome to update since they were never really tied to any underlying data sets. And so this slow review process kind of stemmed from a few different issues that we were having. So there was a lack of standardization. Of course, requests were coming through the mail, email, different departmental programs, and there was no standard format to request this type of spatial information. So we were getting PDF maps, shape files, KML, Google Earth files, and just sometimes coordinates. We also had a lot of decentralized data in-house. Natural Heritage Program was not receiving data from all sections of our Department of Natural Resources, so there were silos of data all over the place, and that resulted in large backlogs to enter data into the data set and created longer entry processes and review times. We also had a problem with the lack of governance with this data. We weren't always sharing the data properly with stakeholders. We didn't have a system to determine which species location data would be considered sensitive, so to protect against poaching and disturbance threats. And we would often share entire data sets to consultants and other groups. This resulted in a diminished trust the program would have to be able to protect this sensitive data, and as a result was often considered out of date and not reliable. So we wanted to be able to improve all our data quality, protect it from any malicious intent, and at the same time allow users to have this improved access they need to do their jobs. So we had a few eureka moments. The tools we were using already with our organizational accounts could get us 80% or so of the way towards a more automated set of workflows. We needed some assistance. So luckily we had a partner that helped us out here with a funding source. Our Department of Transportation, of course, also has a vested interest in this data because they require access to a format and for their own projects. So they were able to grant us some funding to improve our program through working through data backlogs, upgrading to our ArcGIS enterprise system, and enrolling in an Enterprise Advantage program. Enterprise was an ideal software for us because it allowed us to manage our data on local servers, publish reference layers, and then, of course, have access to all the various field collection methods. And all of this content could be packaged really nicely into a custom enterprise site, which allows our program to tailor how we want to experience, they want them to experience and interact with our data. So after almost a year of planning and configuring and testing, the resulting product looks pretty good. I think goal of the site was to be a one-stop shop for all things natural heritage related. Users can identify quick stats on tracked species, access public survey forms, and more. So we also enhanced our county lists, like I showed you earlier, by using operations dashboard, where we can select a county and identify species found within it, filter by status, and find more information on species through NatureServe's Explorer website. We were also able to monitor when users request access through the configured web application, where we can select pending requests, link out to assigned named users with appropriate permissions, and mark it as complete. This really allows for a peace of mind that the stakeholders, the right stakeholders are assigned the right data for their needs. So we now have over 200 users accessing our natural heritage information across the state, federal, local, and private sectors. We converted our main method of data collections and submission to Survey 123 for a form standardized by using NatureServe's methodology. And users can now access this form in the field and submit data directly to the program with no need for any unnecessary repeat data entry. So once the submission occurs, data managers can then quickly identify new records, tag as pending, using app configured in web app builder, and they can check to ensure the species is identified correctly by accessing photos and audio recordings, and mark it approved before they send on to the final database. Once that final database is updated, it's fed back into our our reviewer web tool, which is designed with assistance from our Advantage program. The user can click to draw the project area on the map or provide a shapefile for pre-existing project area data. Supplemental details are then entered and an automated report can then be generated. To protect species, it's important to note that only non-sensitive species records are appearing in this map while using a dedicated feature service, though if a sensitive species does appear nearby, they are referenced from the full data set in tabular format, so we can protect those species locations. What's produced is an automated report with which was designed using layouts in ArcGIS Pro, including cover pages, tables of species found nearby and on site, and best management practices and survey recommendations based on whether the project is found near certain species, wetlands, soil types, and so on. And lastly, once a project is submitted, the appropriate staff are notified via email, and the project boundary information and supplemental information is populated in a dashboard, which tracks incoming requests by county, project type, and so on. So our staff can easily identify which projects have come in the last 30 days, filter by project type, and directly link to the requester's email to request further information as needed. We've already seen an uptick in the number of users submitting requests, taking advantage of the ease of use, and it's allowed our program staff to really focus on more high value projects with time saved manually from responding to reviews. So as of last week, we're now at over 200 project reviews with still 5 months to go in the year, which speaks to the ease at which stakeholders and DNR staff are now able to get their work done. So now that we've acted on our GIS planning, we're in the process of going full circle back to understanding where to go from here, what works and what doesn't, what features can be enhanced. And we've started our second year of our Advantage program to begin planning to growing out some of these sites and build new ones for similar programs while maintaining some of the stuff that we've built in our first year. So with that, thank you very much, and pass back to Sunny.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Thank you to all our presenters. We hope that you found that work inspiring. We hope that you found it relevant to the work that you all do. I feel confident that there was something in there for everyone. We're going to kick it over to Megan now, our moderator, for some question and answers.
Thanks, Sunny. So our first question here is for Missouri. What was the main business limitation that prompted the Parks Department to change how they manage their data or otherwise invest more in GIS?
Yeah, this is Debbie Bradwell. And I think the main thing that helped us is just having the right people at the right time. To be honest, Missouri State Parks has had GIS for a long time, over almost 20 years. That they've been using GIS of some sort, and but it was mostly the silos. But when I came on with the Department of Natural Resources 3 years ago, I was immediately contacted by a couple of the people at state parks, and they were wanting to grow what they had. They realized that that they could do a lot more with what they were doing, and so really just bringing Esri in and showing everyone what the tools are now, what the capabilities were with ArcGIS Online, and setting that initial plan and kind of getting everybody on board. I think that's really what did it for us.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the next question is for South Dakota. How did you deal with managers or employees who did not fully understand new GIS technologies? Was there any pushback? How was that overcome?
So I'd like Ross and I both to answer this question, and maybe Kyle too, but being someone who is not our data person, I am not someone who engages with this technology regularly. The dashboard actually made our data much more accessible to allow managers to look at trends in a way that we couldn't before. And so I think these tools actually enabled us to engage in decisions and data analysis where we may have given pushback before the graphic representation. So at least that's my personal experience, that once the tools were implemented, once the dashboards were implemented, this was all much easier to understand than before. But Ross and Kyle, did you experience anything different than that?
No, not really. In my role, with dealing with a lot of the administrative side of things and senior level officials, they're looking for a quick, easy to use interface to, not only answer the questions that we know that there are going to be coming, but as mentioned in our presentation, we're starting to ask questions now that we weren't asking or even thought to ask previously. So a lot of this comes from people who may not have any GIS fluency. However, we try to make it as simple as possible, perform trainings, perform walkthrough documentation, and to really keep an open mind about implementing any changes that comes from those staff as well.
Great, thank you. And then for South Carolina, how much effort did it take for the South Carolina team to develop their application? What new applications are underway for them?
Cool, great question. So it wasn't because we had our the assistance from our Advantage program. A lot of this stuff actually went really smoothly. We just finished, like I said, our 12-month first year for the Advantage program, and we primarily used them to help us designing a nice sleek template for our hub site, and then also to develop the custom web tool that that runs the report, the automatically generated report. Everything else that you see in there was mostly configurable and built in-house. So there were a few things that needed some extra oomph to get there, but it's pretty doable. And then in terms of where we're going from here, there's been some talk about creating, potentially migrating a lot of our information for our state wildlife action plan into an enterprise site, incorporating things like story maps and other web applications for that regard. And we've got some other projects going on with the rest of our agency as a whole related to public access and other things like that. But we really are taking advantage of the Advantage program as well, helping with some of that. So,
and then one question for South Dakota. What impact has COVID-19 had on outdoor recreation participation?
Ross, if you want to take that one, I'm sure you've been able to keep a hand on that pulse.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the presentation, we use this this tool to really address any rumors or management or restrictions regarding the pandemic. South Dakota is lucky enough. We continue to have our hunt seasons, and even though nearly everybody was working remote starting in March, we actually saw an uptick in resident fishing license sales this spring. So people were enjoying the nice weather, working remote, and I'm sure employee satisfaction maybe went up even a little bit. As far as non-residents, for this example, we didn't see a huge influx of non-residents coming over to go fishing necessarily, or many changes from the previous years. However, we were able to use this tool to really address, again, let's just say rumors, that non-residents are going to be spreading COVID-19, which wasn't the case. And so we had recreational opportunities out there, and we really noticed an uptick in resident fishing license sales this spring.
Great, thank you guys. And so that's all the time we have questions for right now before I pass it back over to Sunny. But if we didn't follow up with, or if we didn't ask your question, we'll follow up with you after the conference. So thank you all for submitting your questions. And now back to you, Sunny.
All right, thank you so much, Megan. So everyone get your mices ready, your mice, your mouses. I don't know how to pluralize that, but we're going to ask a series of polls and have some questions for you all. And we've got a few of them and we don't have much time left, so it's going to be super quick. While we do this, we're going to have the link up to the community story map so that you all can go and add your shining bright faces to our community and kick us off with our virtual. So with that, let's get started with our polls. And we're going to do a series of kind of funny ones first. And this one is for you, Fish and Wildlife. Who would win, fish or wildlife? You should see those polls coming up now. Whoa. Wildlife has it. Okay, next one. This is for you folks in agriculture. Who would win, fruit or veggie? Oh my gosh, fruit all the way. Wow, okay. And last one, this is for you botanists, plant ecologists, heritage folks. Who would win, coniferous or deciduous? Wow, coniferous with a landslide. I'm kind of surprised by some of these. Okay, Mike's gonna start us out with a real serious question first.
Yep. Okay, that was fun, but I told Sunny we have to do some serious stuff too. So here we go. Megan, if you could call up the next poll for the organization. We want to learn more about who's here, who's in attendance, and I think it would be good for you all to see this as well. I talked about all the different organization types involved with environment, natural resource issues and challenges and stuff. So, all right, looks like we got a lot of forestry folks. Let's see, historical present, or yeah, forestry, environmental, okay, academia, excellent. So a wide variety though, and again, that illustrates the point that, you know, collaboration and working together and, you know, coming together around these challenges is really, really important. So, okay, thank you. Sunny, you want to go ahead and take the next one?
All right. Yes, I will. So we're curious, you know, we can't avoid the COVID-19 questions, and we are curious if COVID-19 has influenced your agency's cloud strategy. Have you heard any more about moving to the cloud if you have a lot of on-premise infrastructure? I like the what cloud. We thought we'd get a couple of those, and sure enough, we did. All right, yeah, this is interesting. So a lot of folks don't have a cloud strategy yet, but ones that do definitely see it as a priority now, it looks like. So that's great, good information. Okay, one more COVID question. Has your organization been involved in COVID-19 response? All right, couple answers trickling in. We asked this question because we've heard kind of a diversity across the landscape. Some agencies, some of our environmental agencies, it may not be intuitive, but they're actually getting asked to participate in these things in kind of a surprising way. So, all right.
Okay.
Mike?
Yep, excellent. So we're going to switch gears. Not everything's going to be about COVID. We're going to switch gears now and ask a few technology-oriented questions. So Megan, if you could call up the one about ArcGIS Pro. Obviously, desktop technology in particular, with the entire, you know, technology suite that's available through the platform. Obviously, desktop is very integrated into environment, natural resources workflows. And so we're curious, and we're always keeping a pulse on how folks are doing, you know, getting over to ArcGIS Pro, if they're making that migration and where it sits. And it looks like we've got a wide variety of responses coming in. A lot of folks getting to Pro, which is great to see. and some hybrid, which we see that a lot. And we would encourage you to at least be there now of using both ArcMap and traditional desktop and ArcGIS Pro side by side as you migrate over. But and then we see a few diehard ArcMap folks, which again fully understand, and that helps us though, in terms of where to focus our efforts and in helping you. So thank you.
All right, so this next question is around my favorite topic. I used to work in the field and I used our applications. So have you deployed field apps? And this will be a multiple choice. A lot of collector immediately.
Yeah.
All right, some explorer. None yet. All right, this is excellent. We also forgot to put survey 123 on there. Oops.
Oops.
Oh, well. All right, well, follow up to that is if you do a lot of field work, then you've probably heard about our Field Maps beta program. And we are curious if you're going to participate in the Field Maps beta program. Immediately, a lot of sign me up. All right, for the folks that are wondering what we're talking about, you'll be able to watch some of the information. There was a session about field applications and what's next, and I think you'll hear about field maps and that. It's going to be really exciting and hybridize some of our applications and bring it all together in one field app. All right, next question, Mike.
Okay, so we obviously heard a lot this week, right? At Virtual UC, a lot of great new technology, a lot of enhanced technology, a lot of new capabilities and things like that. So, after attending Virtual UC this year, what are you inspired to try next? So this is more of an open question, and we'd like to just get your first input there. And I don't think this is gonna display necessarily because again it's open, but it'll be really good insight to see where things are going next with all of you.
We're seeing a lot of dashboards.
Yes,
a lot of dashboards coming in. New
voxels,
apps, yay!
Yep. Voxels, not surprised to see that either.
A couple
very excited about
builders.
That. Yep.
Field maps, woohoo! Okay.
Excellent.
The interactive suitability modeler thingy. I could have written that.
Arcade into dashboards. Boy, that's one we hear a lot too. So yeah. Excellent. Locate
Hub.
XT. Yep. Hub.
All right.
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you all.
Awesome.
All right, Mike, do we have time for any more? Or are we gonna move on?
No, I think that's it. So we're down to our last minute here. So again, we very much appreciate you all participating today, helping us come together, grow the community. Again, this is just the beginning. We're going to be following up with more solicitation for feedback, ideas for future topics, ideas for future venues too. It doesn't have to just be at the UC, right? So if you would complete the session feedback, there's a session survey link right on the session page that you all are on. And again, thank you very much. We very much appreciate it. And everything worked well in a virtual format. So we're very excited about that as well. And enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you.
Thank you so much.